You wake up in a room that smells like damp velvet and formal duty. The ceiling is high enough to echo. The walls are stone, the floor is stone, and your sheets are made of something stiff and embroidered that nobody in the household has dared actually wash since your birth. A draft sneaks in from the window, smelling faintly of pine, old armor, and distant goat. You're somewhere in the Alps. You're not entirely sure where. Austria, Switzerland, a particularly decorative corner of Bavaria. It doesn't matter. You're Habsburg. This whole region is basically yours, or will be. If your cousins keep dying on schedule, you climb out of a bed so ornate it could technically qualify as a chapel. A servant bows. Another one hands you warm wine with breakfast. The food smells like salted pork, boiled barley, and ceremonial obligation. No one here eats for pleasure. You eat to keep from fainting during parades. Your great-uncle is also your cousin. Last week he became king of somewhere. No one is sure exactly where. One of those vague kingdoms near the sea with too many vowels. He can't speak the local language. But that's fine. That's not why they gave him the crown. They gave it to him because his mother was your aunt and her father was the emperor. And the last local ruler died mysteriously in a boating accident involving 0 boats. You nod politely when they tell you this. You've learned not to ask questions. Every family tree here looks like someone spilled soup on a map and declared it Europe. You visit the study. Maps cover the walls. They're all slightly out of date. Borders shift faster than the soup gets cold. Kingdoms appear, vanish, reappear under new names. You stop trying to keep track. You're part of something big, too big. The Habsburgs don't win battles. They win weddings. Your uncle married a Spanish princess. Your cousin married the Queen of Bohemia. Your brother is currently en route to propose to a duchess whose family invented a kind of sheep. Every engagement is a land grab in a church. You expand not by bloodshed, but by bloodlines. No one talks about love. They talk about alliances, about claims, about whether your nose is too Austrian for the portrait. The painter squints at your face. You try not to breathe. Every brushstroke might accidentally insult a monarch. The last time someone frowned at a painting, 2 provinces declared war. You walk the halls. Every tapestry is a family tree. Every door leads to a cousin. Your house is stitched together with treaties, sealed with wax, and padded with slightly incestuous optimism. The walls are decorated with portraits of people who married themselves into thrones. Most of them look unhappy. A few are holding scepters. One appears to be holding a lemon. You don't ask. Outside, the empire stretches. In all directions, a patchwork of territories with different laws, languages, and religious arguments. From Spain to Transylvania, from the Low Countries to Naples, all united under one family name, more or less. Mostly less the mail arrives. It's in 5 languages. One of the letters is addressed to His Most Serene Archducal Highness, an Inner Austria, ruler of the Holy Roman sanctioned and Spanish-approved Royal Union of the Western Crowned something. You assume that's you, or your brother, or your horse. Your tutor explains that rulership is your destiny, that God chose your bloodline, that history bends in your family's favor. You nod. Quietly, you scratch a boil on your arm and wonder what God's plan is for that. You eat dinner beneath a chandelier the size of a boat. The nobles discuss another marriage, another treaty, another kingdom brought into the fold with a kiss and a complicated dowry. The musicians play softly. No one laughs. You go to bed surrounded by the smell of candle wax and old paper. You fall asleep in a fortress built not with stone, but with signatures. But power doesn't come free. Every treaty comes with baggage. Every crown comes with a battlefield. You wake up buried under banners. Red, gold, black, lions, eagles, crosses, griffins, crescents, and at least one lizard no one can identify. It takes you a minute to find the door beneath all the heraldry. You trip over a coat of arms trying to find the chamber pot. You call for a servant. 3 arrive. They all address you by a different name. You are now, technically, His Most Catholic Majesty Charles V. By the grace of God, Emperor of the Romans, King of Germany, King of Italy, King of Spain, King of the 2 Sicilies, Archduke of Austria, Duke of Burgundy, Count of Flanders, Lord of the Netherlands, and just for fun, Defender of the Catholic Faith. The full title takes 5 minutes to say 10 if you're being polite. Some of it is ceremonial, some of it is disputed. All of it fits on a coin if you write very, very small. Most of your subjects have never seen you. Some don't believe you're real. In Hungary, you're a portrait. In Spain, you're a rumor. In Bohemia, you're a statue with a bird's nest in its crown. You speak 4 languages poorly and rule 15 cultures reluctantly. The empire stretches from the Americas to Austria. Technically, in practice, it's mostly complaints and taxes. And then happens. A monk in Saxony hammers something to a church door and the universe cracks. The Protestant Reformation arrives like a lit match in a paper library. You squint at a letter warning you about Lutheranism and mutter something about heresy. You're not sure if it's a religious problem or just a regional insult. Either way, the solution is the same. You respond with war. Always war. You raise armies across the empire. German mercenaries, Spanish tercios, Hungarian cavalry. The banners march, the drums beat. Somewhere near the Rhine, a priest is set on fire for translating the Bible too enthusiastically. Your armies are tired. The horses are tired. You're tired, but the war doesn't care. Religious unity was the dream. What you get instead is decades of sieges, famine, broken treaties, and fields of mud that bloom with bodies each spring. The peasants revolt, the nobles revolt, the clergy revolts. You can't even remember which side everyone is on anymore. You attend councils, you sign decrees, you hold meetings in cold castles that smell like damp incense and despair. Every solution just makes someone else angry. You burn witches and print catechisms. You raise taxes and lower expectations. The map keeps changing. Ink bleeds across borders. One day you own Alsace. The next day, someone swears it's French. You just nod. Let them have it. Let them all have it. Then the 30 Years' War begins it. Will feel like 90. Cannon smoke fills the valleys. Children grow up never knowing peace. The cities are shadows of themselves. Prague, Vienna, Magdeburg, all become synonyms for fire. Plague follows the soldiers. Bread vanishes. So does trust. You ask someone where your army is. They ask which one. The emperor is now more a title than a solution. Somewhere near the end, you start dreaming of abdication. You want to retire. You want to plant cabbages. You want to disappear. Eventually you do. You hand the empire to your brother. Spain goes to your son. The rest gets passed down like a cursed heirloom wrapped in Latin dot. You settle in a monastery and slowly die surrounded by clocks. When the war ends, the empire still stands, but nothing feels solid anymore. Even victories come at the price of empty granaries and plague carts. You fall asleep under a painted ceiling in Vienna and wake up, legally speaking, owning mountains you will never see. Someone brings you a ledger. In it, shipments from Peru, taxes from Mexico, silver from Potosi, more silver from Potosi, and a polite note that half the miners are dead again. You initial it. Breakfast is served. Your empire now spans continents, the way mildew spans a damp wall, persistent, spreading, and slightly unhealthy. You measure distance in months of ocean and tons of extracted metal. Somewhere beyond storms and scurvy, your coat of arms is nailed to a fort facing a jungle that hates you. In Seville, galleons creak at their moorings, bellyful of silver, things that used to belong to other people. Feathered cloaks, carved saints, gold bowls, rumors of emeralds the size of plums. Dock clerks scratch tallies. Priests bless manifests. Accountants faint at the numbers. Soldiers steal anyway. Try not to think about mercury poisoning in the mines. You try not to think about lungs filled with dust 2 worlds away. Buying draperies for a hunting lodge in Tyrol. Money pours in. So do bills. War, fortifications, dowries, back wages, loans to bankers who loan you your own money back with interest. Inflation turns your treasure fleets into increasingly decorative firewood. You pay for yesterday's campaign with next year's silver. Everyone smiles. No one sleeps. The family strategy remains unchanged. Marry the problem. You marry your niece. Your son marries his cousin. Your nephew marries someone who is both. Court painters work miracles with jawlines, but reality begins to show through the varnish. Cheeks narrow, eyes sink, chins lengthen. Bloodlines fold in on themselves like pastry left too long in the sun. At dinner, you watch relatives tilt their heads carefully so breathing remains optional. A physician whispers that purity of line is a theological concept, not a medical one. You ignore him. Spain, once the armored fist of your greatness, fades under the weight of its own inheritance. The countryside is tired. The treasury is hollow. The court is full of protocol and pale children. Then there's Charles. Charles. 2 of Spain is more prayer than person. Pale, swollen-lipped, the jaws so heavy it might require engineering. He struggles to chew. Speaking is a diplomatic event. Governing, that's handled by committees of hopeful uncles. Astrologers, confessors, and desperate ministers orbit him, like carrion crows around a sick ox. Every year you hope he'll produce an heir. Every year the paperwork grows thicker, and the cradle stays empty. When Charles dies, he leaves a kingdom, several lawsuits, and a crown-shaped hole big enough to start a European war. Spoiler, it will. Meanwhile, north of the Pyrenees, the Austrian branch keeps chewing on survival. With Spain wobbling, Vienna learns to stand on its own boots, which are currently planted in Hungary. Hungary groans. Tax grain, raise troops, stamp out revolts, repeat. The plains flood, the nobility plots. The frontier bleeds. To the east, the Ottomans push. They test your fortresses, the way wolves test fences. Patient, regular, confident. There are sieges, heroic cavalry charges, plague in the supply trains. Treaties that last just long enough for everyone to reload. You attend war councils that smell of damp maps and pipe smoke. Generals trace rivers you've never crossed. Someone mentions Vienna's walls. You pretend not to shiver all the while. Coins continue to sail west to east. Blood flows east to west, and the family jaw keeps widening like a geological fault. You are rich, wide, brittle, and tired. There's a cost to being everywhere. You can't hold this many lands in your arms forever. Something's going to fall. You are now mostly ceremony. You wear silk stockings, a powdered wig, and a brocade jacket so stiff it could serve as a small drawbridge. There are medals pinned to every available surface. Most of them were awarded to your ancestors. Some were awarded to horses. One commemorates the battle of somewhere that no longer exists. You nod graciously when people compliment it. You sit on a throne you didn't build, ruling over 1,000 different people, most of whom don't speak your language. You speak High German. They speak Hungarian, or Czech, or Slovenian, or Italian, or Slovak, Polish, Romanian, Croatian, Ukrainian, Yiddish, Latin, French, or something that only exists in one specific valley near Galicia. They smile, they bow, then they quietly revolt. You issue decrees. They issue local workarounds. You raise taxes. They hide the grain. You ban books. They rewrite them under different titles. You are emperor in theory. In practice, you are a foreign landlord with good tailoring and questionable maps. Meanwhile, the Enlightenment tiptoes in like a draft beneath the doors of your marble palace. Philosophers begin to whisper unsettling things. Things like, should peasants have rights? Does divine right mean anything if the crops keep failing? Do we actually need 20 archdukes to manage 3 provinces? Should taxes make sense? You listen politely, you nod, you consult your advisors. Then you raise the grain tax. Art blossoms on your watch. Frescoes spread across ceilings, like icing on a collapsing cake. Harpsichord music drifts through courtyards where no one has been paid in 3 months. Your empire is beautiful in the way old buildings are beautiful before the roof gives out. And then Maria Theresa appears. She is not your typical Habsburg. No powdered frailty, no ceremonial size. She is iron in lace, spine made of policy, mother of 16, empress by sheer force of maternal momentum. She centralizes, she modernizes, she outargues bishops and bulldozes old laws with updated ones, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in German, always with full conviction. She bans torture, sort of. She mandates smallpox inoculations. She reforms education. She yells at her sons with the same tone she uses for foreign ministers. She holds the line barely through war, inheritance, crises, and entire cabinets of sulking noblemen, but even she can't fix everything. The empire is a mosaic, pretty but fragile. If you step too hard, the tiles shift. Ethnic resentments bubble under the surface. Peasants groan under tax burdens shaped like old military defeats. Bureaucracy swells like a waterlogged animal. Somewhere in Galatia, it now takes 6 forms and 3 bribes to buy a goat. Reform comes in bursts, often followed by panic, reversal, or polite forgetting. Your court debates theology, while the countryside debates whether eating bark counts as treason. The nobles argue over dancing etiquette. The peasants argue over who gets the dry patch of cabbage field. The empire expands its libraries, while forgetting to fix its roads. And then from the west comes a noise like thunder, sharp, sudden, and full of knives. The French Revolution, heads fall into baskets, crowns roll like loose apples. The idea of monarchy itself begins to wobble. You blink, the Habsburgs blink. Everything you were taught to believe now has an angry pamphlet printed against it. You tighten your collar. You summon more guards. You ban the word guillotine in public, and you pray that the fire stays west of the Rhine. But fire has a way of spreading, and one day it puts on a bicorn hat and marches east. Napoleon is coming. You are now running, not physically of course. You're still seated in a grand drafty hall, trying to remember how to spell archduchy on a treaty. But mentally, spiritually, diplomatically, you are fleeing from France, from cannon smoke, the growing suspicion that maybe God didn't personally appoint you to rule 17 different peoples who all hate each other because Napoleon has arrived, not a king, not a duke, just a short Corsican with good boots and a very loud army. He marches across your lands like he owns them, because, for a while, he does. Your ancient bloodlines mean very little to men who fight for ideas and eat their horses. If necessary, you lose. You write letters, you sue for peace. You promise neutrality. You retreat, you lose again. Eventually, you give him your daughter. She becomes Empress of the French. You say it's diplomacy. Everyone else says it's begging. You go to the wedding with a polite smile and a stomach full of acid. You toast to the future of Europe and try not to think about how many of your soldiers are buried in that future. Then comes the funeral, not yours. His, Napoleon, falls, eventually crushed under snow, pride, and coalition armies made of men who would rather die than eat another boiled shoe. You celebrate quietly. You're still standing. But the world is different now. The Holy Roman Empire, the thing that made you emperor for centuries, is dead. Officially dissolved in 1806. Murdered not by Napoleon, but by irrelevance. You don't announce it with fanfare, you just stop mentioning it. Like a failed marriage or a missing heir. Instead, you create something new. The Austrian Empire. A fresh title. A new name. Same family. Same problems. Slightly different stationery. You redraw borders. You rename departments. You host congresses with grand tables and bland outcomes. Vienna becomes a symbol of restoration. Stiff collars, polished marble, and a careful attempt to pretend the 18th century never ended. Your people are exhausted. You call it peace. Your treasury is hollow. You call it prudence. Your family line is thinning. You call it continuity. You tell yourself you've won because you survived. But glory is gone. The empires of myth, Charlemagne, Caesar, your great-great-grandfather, who ruled 3 kingdoms and a donkey path in Burgundy, are dust. Now it's just paperwork and powder. Now it's just watching the pot and hoping it doesn't boil over. You place your hand on a map. You say, "This is mine," but you know it's not true. Not really. Not anymore, because revolutions don't die. They just change outfits. And somewhere, someone is printing a pamphlet about justice, or unity, or bread. The age of war is over for now, but peace has its own problems, especially when your empire is more contradiction than country, and it's starting to crack. You are a clerk now, so is your emperor, so is your empire. Once you measured power in horses and gold, now you measure it in paper, stacks of it, stamped, signed, filed, lost, refiled, lost again. You issue permits for coal, for marriages, for pickles. You conduct censuses that no one answers truthfully. You publish imperial decrees no one reads in 5 languages, none of which are spoken in the village you're sending them to. Nothing works, but everything is documented. You are the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is 2 empires, sharing a monarch, a train system, and a deep mutual resentment. The Hungarians get their own crown, their own parliament, their own right to ignore. You, more officially, you call it compromise. They call it survival. Everyone else just calls it confusing. Vienna becomes a monument to beautiful decay. Cafes serve strong coffee and existential dread. Waltzes echo through ballrooms filled with people who are quietly wondering if it's all about to end. Freud is scribbling in a notebook about dreams and mothers. Everyone else is having slow, fashionable nervous breakdowns. Your empire speaks German, Hungarian, Czech, Slovak, Polish, Ruthenian, Croatian, Slovenian, Italian, Romanian, and Yiddish, and they're all very upset. In exquisite prose, you try to hold them together with red tape. Literal red tape. The civil service develops it to bind documents. It becomes a metaphor for everything that's wrong with you. You build railways to bind your lands, and they deliver rebels. You build schools to civilize your peasants, and they read revolutionary poetry. You legalize ethnic autonomy, then quietly hope no one uses it. Franz Joseph is emperor for 68 years. He wears the same uniform the entire time. Stiff collar, sad. Eyes, buttons polished like the empire's fading legacy. He buries his wife. He buries his son. He buries his brother. Eventually, it starts to feel like that's the job. He doesn't change, but everything else does. Electric lights flicker on in cities where serfs still live. Factories rise beside feudal estates. Trains arrive on time. But revolutions do not. You see the rise of nationalism. Like slow water swelling behind a dam. Czechs want rights. Croats want autonomy. Serbs want to burn something down? You nod politely. You pass reforms. You ban newspapers. The empire begins to feel like a haunted house. Everyone is still in their rooms, speaking softly, pretending not to notice the creaking walls. And then, someone shoots a man in Sarajevo, a minor archduke. Born into a chain of marriages no one understood. Dies in a car that took a wrong turn. And somehow, that's enough. The alliances snap. The treaties ignite. The entire machine, bureaucratic, imperial, increasingly delusional, lurches into war like a drunken puppet show. You think it will be a short war, a clean war, a war to prove you're still relevant. Instead, it becomes a funeral march, and you're next in line. You are old, you are tired. You are an empire held together by fading ink and ceremonial buttons. The year is 1914, and you are still pretending everything is fine. Your boots are polished, your trains are on time, your army is half shoeless and made of boys who don't speak the same language. The war begins, and no one knows why. Not really, not in a way that matters. A man was shot, a treaty was triggered, and now you are dragging 50 million people into a meat grinder to prove a point. You'll no longer remember. You send men to the front with wooden rifles and leather helmets. You order bayonets against machine guns. You draw lines in the dirt with bones. They die in the Alps, in the Carpathians, in the mud of Galicia and the snow of Serbia. No one wins. They just stop counting. Cities crumble. Trains stop. Horses are eaten. The empire frays from the outside in. Poles, Czechs, Croats, Italians, all drifting toward something else. Something not to. You try to hold it together with loyalty oaths and ration cards. You call up teenage boys and men over 50. You send priests to the front to bless corpses. The food runs out, then the coal, then the patience, and then Franz Joseph dies. 68 years of reigning, brooding, aging, gone in a stiff military coffin and some black crepe. You replace him with Carl Jung. Earnest, slightly confused Carl. He tries to make peace. The generals ignore him. The empire ignores him. By now, you are a ghost. Borders blur. Languages erupt. Everything is crumbling. But the post still delivers mail. The enemy doesn't destroy you. You do it yourself. Hungary leaves first. Then Czechoslovakia appears, almost by accident. The Balkans splinter. Austria becomes a footnote. No gunfire, no final charge, just a slow, embarrassed silence. You are not defeated, you dissolve, like old sugar in bitter tea. At Versailles, they redraw the world with shaky hands and thick pencils. Your name is scratched out, your flags are burned, your bureaucracy is scattered to the winds, still clutching appointment books and sealing wax. Carl goes into exile. He tries to come back. Twice, no one listens. The empire dies not with a bang, but with a shrug and some paperwork. And then one morning, you wake up in a world with no Habsburgs, no emperor, no crown lands, just a lot of memories, some dusty uniforms, and a generation wondering what all the dying was for. Vienna becomes a city again, not a capital, just a city with bad plumbing and beautiful music. The palace is a museum now. Tourists take pictures of mirrors that once reflected monarchs. The chandeliers still shine, but they flicker when the power cuts. You stir your coffee in a Viennese cafe that still smells faintly of empire. The wallpaper is peeling. The string quartet is playing something sad. The sugar dissolves slowly in the cup. No more emperors, no more glory, just a quiet goodbye to a very long name.